The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Executive Committee will now begin.
Good morning and welcome to the regular meeting of the Executive Committee for July 21st. My name is Jacob Fry and I'm the chair of this committee. As we begin, I'll note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by committee members and city staff as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local public health emergency. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify a quorum for the meeting.
Councilmember Gordon.
Here.
Jenkins.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bender.
Here.
Mayor Fry.
Here.
There are 5 members present.
Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum and can therefore proceed with business before us today. Colleagues, our agenda is before us. I'll move to adopt the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion or amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Mayor Fry.
Aye.
There are 5
Aye.
ayes.
That motion carries and the agenda is adopted. Next, we have the acceptance of the minutes from our regular meeting on June 30th and the special meeting on July 14th. I move acceptance of those minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Mayor Fry.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
That passes, and that brings us to our discussion items. This is number 3. The first item, number 3 on our agenda, is an update from HR regarding waivers that were granted since the beginning of the hiring freeze. And this is a report scheduled to be received at every executive committee meeting while the hiring freeze is in effect. And I'll recognize Deb Kruger from the city's HR department to give an update.
Thank you, Mayor Fry, members of the Executive Committee. Are we able to put up the hiring freeze report? Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. As Mayor Fry stated, this is a report that goes back through the beginning of the implementation of the hiring freeze on March 31st, which Mayor Fry implemented as a cost containment measure during the local public health emergency. Again, was then adopted by City Council on May 1st. So this report is going to cover hiring freeze waivers that have been received and the exemptions from that hiring freeze from March 31st through the hiring waivers that were fully completed and finalized on July 6th. And then I've put some additional information in kind of as a context on whether or not sort of the hiring freeze has been effective as a cost containment measure. And so I'm putting some benchmark information out here. The budget office, the finance budget office prepared sort of a phase 1 2020 budget savings plan. And in that plan that was given to elected officials, there was a section for the hiring freeze. And as of June 1st, there were 275 vacant positions at the city enterprise, totaling a savings of about $23 million. So if we use that as a baseline, and then take into account the number of positions out of those 275 that have been approved, and the dollar expenditures that will take away from that $23 million, I figured we could use that as a baseline. And that $23 million in savings would generally, of course, be reduced by the cost of the approved hiring waivers, which I've calculated on page 2, which we'll go through in just a moment. When I say generally reduced, what I mean, what that won't capture will be sort of the daily and ongoing changes in the workforce since June 1st, which will include, additional positions that have been vacated as employees leave the city. Generally, there have been 65 total waivers, not positions, but the waivers submitted. 48 have been approved, 6 have been partially approved where the department has asked for more than one vacancy, but they weren't all granted, and 11 have been denied.
Ms. Kruger, I have a quick question on this,
Absolutely.
and I know the answer, so it's really more of a point that I want to make. But in addition to the 11 that are denied, there are also instances in which a department head just chooses not to bring forward a request at all. And so there are positions that are continuing to go unfilled and we are not making hires for them, but you don't see them listed on this chart because the department head decided not to move forward. So for instance, I have a vacancy in my office that we're not filling, and that we didn't come forward with it at all.
Mayor Frey, absolutely. The chart on page 2, we can actually go over that, and we'll talk about the number of vacant positions that there still are at the city. You're absolutely right. By far, the majority of the vacant positions have not been requested to be filled. Page 2 that is showing up on the screen is a kind of a summary breakdown by department. The number of the departments that have submitted waivers, whether they've been approved or denied. I'm going to just go along the total along the bottom. If you have specific questions, please feel free to ask. The first column, the number of waivers that have been submitted by those departments have been 65. Of those waivers submitted, 54 have been approved. The number of positions, but I'll say FTEs that have been, of those 54, has encompassed 3,502.5 people. I don't want to call them positions. By far, the vast majority of those have not been permanent positions. They have been seasonal, temporary, grant-funded, non-permanent types of hires. There are some footnotes down at the bottom. For instance, in the clerk's office, they encompassed 2,900 of those hires for seasonal election staff, including election judges and other seasonal staff. It also includes 400 step-up interns that have been paid fully through external grant funds, and about 60 of the positions in public works that were seasonal capital construction projects, and they're temporary through the end of the year. So by and large, those are mostly either unpaid or temporary staff. The next column over, the cost of those approved hires where it has not been grant funded positions is about $11.4 million. The next column over, I thought it was important to pull out the subsection of those number of approved hires that were for permanent city positions. And that's 67 of those 3,502, encompassing just shy of $6 million. We had 11 of the waivers that were denied, which encompassed 12.5 positions. To Mayor Frey's point, we started with 275 vacant positions on June 1st. 67 of them have been granted approval to fill. Not all of them have been filled at this point. In addition, we have had 58 additional employees leave the city, so 58 additional vacancies. So sort of the net of all of that, what we've started with, what was approved to fill, and now additional vacancies were about 266.
Ms. Krug, if you could pause just briefly for a question from Councilmember Gordon.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. So it looks like we were hoping to save $23 million in this, and so far that's been reduced to 11.6 million. Am I understanding that correctly?
11.4 million.
I was doing the subtraction.
Yes, would be the subtraction. Most of those hires were just through the end of this year, but yes, that would be 11.4 million.
So
and then we've also had additional vacancies since then that have not been captured in the dollar savings amount.
Right, so that would be something to track, certainly with early retirees or people who are leaving the city, which is a little bit, I think, was separate from the 23 million. 23 million was new hires based on the previous budget, and it sounds like we cut that in about half. So we should still be worried about not hitting that 23 million, and how are we going to recover those savings elsewhere? Is that correct?
I mean, I could ask the budget office to kind of do a delta. Most of the money, okay, most of the 11.4 million were in, it wasn't included in that savings amount of 23 million. It was capital construction project money that was approved in the 2020 budget and had not been reduced and was not part of that savings because they're they were temporary, as well as the elections. That money had also not been included in that $23 million. Those were for permanent vacant positions. So I think perhaps the more important dollar figure here would be the number of permanent FTEs that were filled. That correlates more directly to the $23 million in savings in the phase 1 budget savings plan. And so was just shy of $6 million. And my rough estimates, I didn't do a full analysis, but my rough estimates of the additional vacancies since then is around 4 million. So it's about, 1.9 million different.
Well, thanks. And I suppose we'll have to hear back from the budget office and figure out where they got that 23 million and how this impacts it. But really appreciate the report.
Council President Bender.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I wondered if finance was on this call or not. And I did just want to clarify that not all of these positions were newly added in the 2020 budget. Most of them that I recall, aside from the seasonal employees, are staff positions that a person left and was not filled. Or the question is whether or not to fill it. So health inspectors, folks who are operating our water treatment plant, those kinds of staff positions are the ones that are permanent FTEs where someone has left in the open position. The question was whether or not to fill it. And Mr. Mayor, it looks like Mr. Ruff can help answer some of the finance questions.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Mayor, Council President Bender, Councilmember Gordon, unfortunately, I can't answer today the questions you're asking, but I think if what I'm hearing from Councilmember Gordon is, along with the report that Ms. Kruger is submitting, the executive committee would like some general report periodically for the rest of the year. Just how are we doing on meeting the goals of the budget savings? Is that a correct assumption? And if that's the case, then I can make sure that that is included in some high level, and we'll have somebody on the call to specifically address questions if that's what the executive committee is looking for.
That makes sense to me. Council President, Councilmember Gordon, is that what you were thinking?
That would be useful to know. Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I think that makes sense. I'm also happy to send along the requests as they come as an FYI to the committee, so you have access to the more detailed information as it's coming. I have checked in with colleagues about some of the things that I think might, bigger items or things that might be policy questions. So I don't mind doing that at all. I personally won't have time to answer all the questions with all the other things that I'm managing personally, but it could give you a chance to follow up with staff if you have any specific questions.
Great. Ms. Kruger.
I did not have anything to add unless there were some additional questions. There is one additional attachment to the request for council action, which is a more specific spreadsheet that lists out for each department the actual job titles, what type of funding is used for the positions that were granted, the budgetary savings. So if you're interested in the actual job titles that were filled, things like 911 dispatcher, Like you said, the critical positions in the water treatment plant, those types of things. It is listed in the Excel spreadsheet that has every single job title listed.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the report, and seeing no further questions, I'll direct the clerk to file that report. The other two remaining items on our agenda relate to the resignation of our Director of Community Planning and Economic Development Department. These actions are the formal end to the process that this committee began in June to address allegations against the director. Item number 4 is to accept the resignation of David Frank as CPED Director. His resignation letter dated July 2nd, 2020 is included in the LIMS file on the city's website. And then item number 5 is to confirm the designation of Andrea Brennan as the interim CPED Director effective July 1st, 2020. While this committee already designated Ms. Brennan in that role at our meeting on June 30th, it was stated at the time that the action was pending final action by the City Council to remove David Frank from the position. And since Mr. Frank resigned from the council before the council met, our action today is just to clarify and confirm that Ms. Brennan is indeed serving as the city's interim CPED Director, even though the council did not act. And so this is more of a procedural item, and in some ways it's more of a belt and suspenders approach. And so I'll move items 4 and 5. Is there any discussion? Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank Ms. Brennan for being willing to step into this role. She has my full confidence as the interim CPED Director, and I think brings a lot of experience and skill to the role. And I think in particular, not only subject matter expertise in some of the biggest problems facing our city around housing and housing stability, housing policy, housing finance, but also a real, I think very supportive approach to working with staff and managing staff. And I think, CPED has been through a lot of change, even in my time in office, and having that skill set at the helm at this time, both managing staff well and helping staff manage their time and being supportive of staff are all really critical right now. So I just, I agree with your choice. I appreciate Ms. Brennan's work in this role. I think sometimes in the interim scenario, directors end up doing their old job plus their new job, and I'm a little concerned about leaving that in place for too long in CPED with so many things happening related to equitable and economic recovery and housing and homelessness and the normal work of CPED, the implementation of the comprehensive plan and all the zoning things that go along with that. So I know Ms. Brennan is fully capable of taking on all of that, but she will need the support of the department and an ability to delegate all of that other detailed work as well. So hopeful that the interim scenario won't last too long in this department, just because of all of that critical work that's happening and the need to make sure that there's someone in charge of each of those things. So thanks for the great choice, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Ms. Brennan for stepping into this role.
Thank you, Madam President. I could not agree with you more on everything you just said, from the expertise of Andrea Brennan to the need to fill some of these vacancies as well so that the work can continue and the director is not doing too many different jobs. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I'll move. I have moved approval of items 4 and 5, and I'll ask that the clerk call the roll on items number 4 and 5.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Mayor Fry.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
That motion carries, and items number 4 and 5 are approved. And with that, we've concluded all of our items on the agenda for today. And without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.